Good morning. Today on Spotlight, an inside look at mental health funding, solutions, and political tug of war in Michigan. Willie Brooks, president and CEO of the Detroit Wayne Integrated Health Network, will be my guest. And later on our program, meet Otis Bellinger, founder and director of a very successful and long-standing male mentorship program called Building Better Men. What's his secret for making males responsible members of our community? We'll find out. It's Sunday, November the 10th. I'm Chuck Stokes, and this is Spotlight. Would it be smart to say that funding for mental health in this state absolutely needs fixing? Start from the ground up and redo it?
I think one of the issues with the funding is the lack of consistency and the lack of direction as it relates to the many avenues in which the funding has to actually take care of. We have a moving target of things that we have to address. A good example is autism. 5 years ago, Detroit Wayne spent roughly $5 million in autism benefits. Now, just 5 years later, we're looking at spending over $60 million in autism benefits. So as more people become aware of the different services that we have, there's an increase. So it's not just a funding issue, it is a benefit issue and a consistency issue that actually have to meet the need that is out there.
Up under the Snyder administration, they attempted to do so. Now you have a change in administration. Governor Whitmer is trying to get her arms around it. What's the best advice that you can give folks?
Well, I think one is we have to have a realistic look at what the funding should cover. It's such a broad spectrum of benefits out there. There's such a broad need out there. I think we clearly have to define realistically what we should look at. If we can do that, that would make things a lot easier. The other problem that we have is that we are a safety net, meaning that you basically can't buy the coverage that we get. You can't buy this in private insurance. Once someone becomes eligible under Medicaid for mental illness or substance use, it is typically a benefit that we only provide. Therefore, our service levels continue to increase because there is no other alternative. We are the safety net for the state.
All right, so people understand you get your lion's share of money from the federal government.
That's correct.
You also get a big chunk from the state government,
yes,
and you get a smaller amount from Wayne County. Right now, it's what you get from the state government that's up in the air because of the vetoes that Governor Whitmer recently took action on, correct?
That is correct. We received nearly $800 million in federal dollars, roughly $39 million in general fund dollars, which is controlled by the state, and then roughly around $9 million in county dollars. So the dollars that are in question right now are the general fund dollars. And those dollars are critical because the general fund dollars allow us to perform preventive services that the Medicaid dollars are not eligible to provide, such as school prevention programs in which we can address trauma at an early age, juvenile and the criminal system prevention services that we do that also reduce our overall costs because we can prevent individuals from getting in the system. Right now, we're looking at a $9 million reduction in our general fund that we're trying to hopefully get fixed now. Working with the legislators, working with the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services, that is one of my main objectives, is to try and secure that funding and prevent that $9 million cut from actually occurring.
What's holding that up other than just the veto signature of the governor? It's about negotiations between Democrats and Republicans and coming together on it?
Well, there's three things. One thing that is holding it up is, in general, the general fund dollars is not really sufficient for the entire state. So one of the things the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services did to alleviate that was they had a redistribution of funds. in that redistribution of funds, Detroit Wayne was set to lose $4.5 million each year for the next 5 years for a total of $22.5 million.
And as you said earlier, this comes out of the preventative stuff you're trying to do.
That comes out of so those things actually reduce costs and help us to better use our Medicaid dollars. So that cut came mainly because there's really not enough general fund dollars in the system itself. And it does not really help the system to take away from one entity and then try to uphold another entity while the entity that you're taking away is falling down. So that is one of the problems that we have. The other problem is the budget issue, with the vetoes. There were some supplementals that were added to the budget to help alleviate our reductions until we could figure out a solution, and those measures did not go through. So therefore, we're in the second year of that $4.5 million reduction, meaning that we have a $9 million reduction that we're facing now. And hopefully, we can work with the legislators to try and alleviate that process.
All right, we need to take a little break. When we come back, I want to talk about these crisis clinics that you have going throughout the metropolitan area. And we'll talk about this name change, too, while you did that. We'll be right back with Willie Brooks. Stay with us. Willie Brooks, one of our guests today on Spotlight, President and CEO of the Detroit Wayne Integrated Health Network. Crisis clinics, you have those throughout the area. Do you have enough?
We do not have enough.
Never have enough.
We do not have enough, and we're working on that. We're working with some of our providers and some of our hospitals to help out with the crisis center, but the long-term plan is to actually build a facility that will actually handle a lot of the crisis intervention. That will alleviate some of the pressure from the police force, some of the emergency rooms in the hospitals. Our goal is to have a facility up in early 2021. So we've started the process. We have architects, we have plans and designs, and we're really looking forward to creating that crisis center. I believe that we need 3 within Wayne County. We're starting with this one, and our goal is to slowly add as we continue to progress.
We have a shortage in psychiatric beds?
Yes, we do. And
getting better or worse?
I would say it is slowly getting better. One of the problems with psychiatric beds is that the staffing has to be so highly intensified, highly trained, so that it's difficult to actually have support for a psychiatric unit when you don't have a surety that you're going to receive all the revenue. So a lot of it is a funding and a structure problem. If you create a demand and if you create a means for people to benefit from meeting that demand, you can basically resolve that issue. But we clearly have an issue with, as it relates to reimbursement and making sure that hospitals and other agencies can actually invest in things like that.
Your agency does a lot of public advertising.
Yes, we do.
I assume you're doing that to help increase the awareness of the mental health problem and to help erase the stigma associated with this area of the health? That
is so correct, especially with the stigma. We advertise to show people that it is a normal thing to seek help. Right now, the stigma is so high with mental illness.
It's like any other health issue.
Exactly. And so you have individuals who will not take their medicine because they don't want to be associated with mental illness. You have employers who are leery of hiring individuals because they have mental illness, not realizing that many employers have functioning individuals who perform extremely well with mental illness, and they're just not aware of it.
Is your advertising budget also caught up in this perhaps shortage of funds that you're trying to get from the state?
Yes, it is, because the Medicaid dollars were not allowed to actually advertise. We rely mainly on our general fund dollars, and using those dollars, we can actually reduce the stigma and actually save lives.
Are we making progress on trying to train and educate first responders on how to deal with mental health patients?
We recently trained over 3,000 first responders and 16,000 individuals with mental health first aid. Awareness, again, is a key to resolving some of the problems, and having individuals who can identify and know how to service individuals is key in the fight against stigma.
You recently changed your name.
Yes.
Why? It's now the Detroit Wayne Integrated Health Network.
Well, you know, I was very happy with that name change. Our board was very supportive of that move. And what it does is it gives a better picture of what we do. You know, we actually try to enhance the lives of individuals. We work with physical health care, behavioral health care, social well-being, economic well-being, and spiritual well-being, those 5 aspects. Having our name changed to integrated care allows individuals to realize that we will assist people with housing, with job placement, with being a part of the community, making sure that they have their physicals and making sure that they have their behavior needs. So
all of this can feed into the larger mental health picture.
And it gives a better description of what we actually do.
And when Spotlight returns, we'll talk to Otis Bellinger of Building Better Men. We'll be right back. And welcome back to Spotlight. Joining me now is Otis Bellinger. He's the founder and director of an organization called Building Better Men. And welcome to Spotlight.
Thanks for having me here, Chuck.
We've been trying to get you on for a long time. It's taken us a while, so I apologize for that.
No problem.
But every time I go to something where they're talking about mentoring males, particularly African-American males, people ask me, have you talked to Otis Bellinger yet? And they sort of say, and they say in a very affectionate way, say he's the king of mentorship. You've been doing this a long time and have a great reputation in the community. How did you get started, and tell us about the program itself?
Well, first, I'm very humbled by that, Chuck, coming from a person such as yourself. Building Better Men actually started in my mindset at age 12.
Really?
Right, because every day up until age 12, I would cry every day because I was upset that I didn't know my biological father.
Okay.
So at age 12, I met a gentleman who told me the best way that you can deal with pain and trauma is to help someone else in their pain and trauma. So at that moment, I knew that if I got out of the Dexter and Davidson neighborhood, which is a pretty rough neighborhood out of Detroit,
right,
I was going to do something to impact others. So when I came out of college, a couple years after, in 1991, I said, now is the time for me to actually impact others. So that's when I began the program, Building Better Men, which is a mentoring and leadership development program for young men ages 8 to 18.
Yeah, you've had a litany of people that have come through that. Many very, very successful now. Josh Landon over at Channel 2, one of our competitors, competitive station, but a great guy, doing a great job in this town. He was one of the ones who told me, he said, you know, Otis is the man. He takes young men and he shapes them and molds them. What's the secret?
Well, you know, one of the main things, Chuck, is that it's about love. And what I tell young men is that if you love the person who takes care of you, such as a mother, grandmother, someone, you don't want to hurt them. You don't want to put stress on them. So whatever you have to do. You
aren't a silo. None of us are a silo.
That's right.
That you're connected to somebody some kind of way.
That's right. So make them proud. So every time you decide to make a decision that may be detrimental or a decision that can come back on them to cause stress, think about them. So when that friend comes up or a situation comes up that is telling you that it's wrong, think about the person who loves you the most. And on the other side, every young man that comes into our program, we connect them up with what's called a career track. Everything other than sports and rapping. Although if God blesses them with that ability, fine. But if not, we know most of us have to have a backup plan. So what we do is we do what's called asset framing, whereas we look at the assets of the young man. So not the negative contributions. So like for instance, if a young man has an anger problem, but he enjoys playing with Play-Doh or slime or something like that, then we say, right now you're angry, but you could become a future chemical engineer. You can take what you like, you can take your passion and build that into a career track so that you can have a purpose-driven life later. And so we sort of...
So it's kind of like analyzing each
Right.
individual, figuring out what it is that excites them, what they perhaps have a natural talent for,
Right.
and then taking that and increasing that in some way, shape, or form.
Right, you know, each young man is individual. So beyond just the asset framing, we deal with person-centered planning, but also we deal with a trauma-induced focus, which means that, you know, to not know your dad, to not have that experience is traumatic to a lot of our young black males. So that's why earlier this summer, I decided to open up 3 counseling centers in Flint, Detroit, and Ferndale. And what it is we do, along with the mentoring and leadership development, we have decided to add a mental health component where we can actually deal with the trauma that is affecting you from being successful.
We'll be right back with Otis Bellinger. Stay with us. How do you find the young men that you work with?
Well, one thing I would like to say is that we now have second generation. We have young men who are in the program who actually bring their sons. So they figure that if it worked for me, it could work for them.
Well, and that's a great testimony to the program and to you and, and your leadership team. How many, we'll get back to that in a second, so people get some idea, roughly how many men are you working with, young men?
We have 232 young men enrolled in the program, but we have a waiting list of well over 300.
Wow, that's big, so that's success. All right, so how do you get these young men, besides those that are coming from the second generation, say the first generation, those who have never been into the program, they don't know someone, you know, they haven't been exposed to the program at all. Where do they come from?
Well, we have young men that come from all over, but actually, you know, on our website, it has our actual data, which it talks about how we've helped, you know, young men literacy rates, you know, improve. We also help young men to be able to respect adults and authority figures unconditionally. So there's some data attached to our program that lets parents know that, you know what, maybe I'm gonna try this because it's worked for so long with other young men. So young men and parents who are in the program are really our biggest marketing tools.
How do you compete against the peer pressure? Because that is huge when you're at the age group that you're dealing with.
Right. Well, you know, peer pressure is huge, but at the same time, we tell young men, you have to take an inventory of yourselves. So we let them know that weekly, you have to look at the things that you can do without in your life, what you can add in your life, and what you should have never let enter your life. So, and we always equate it back to, are you making your mother proud? Are you making your grandmother proud? Are you making who cares for you every day proud? So we equate that with love because you don't hurt the ones that you love.
What do you do with the young men who maybe don't have someone significant in their life, or at least maybe not someone that they're proud of?
Well, you know, we have a lot of young men like that, Chuck, and we actually let them know that we're here for you. And
you become their family.
Right. Well, I look at myself as having 230-something sons. So, I mean, I will step in the gap, but I also have volunteers who step in the gap. And then we have some constant sponsors who've been able to help us be able to do some of the things we've done to sustain our program.
Yeah, and that was going to be the next question is, what do you need in terms of volunteer? Because you can't do this all by yourself, not with 232 kids. You know, you would never be able to sleep. How do you recruit volunteers, and what is it you're looking for in volunteers?
Okay, we have a website. May I get a website out now?
Yeah, you can go
That's
right
buildingbettermen, one word, .org.
Okay.
And so we have a site where they can volunteer, they can donate. We're always looking at community partnerships. We're always looking at expanding our program. So let's say you're a church or you're a community organization and you want to be able to have a program for young males ages 8 to 18, we will actually come in and provide that program for you. And as we spoke earlier, one of the largest churches in Detroit under the leadership of Pastor Solomon Kinlock, we have a partnership with Triumph Church where we actually provide the male mentoring program for their church.
And we should say Triumph Churches,
Triumph
because
churches.
he has several churches
Right.
throughout the city. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Final question. All too often we hear older people sometimes say sarcastically, I don't know what we're going to do with this generation.
Right.
Is there any real difference between the young men and women of this generation and past generations?
Well, there is, but I have to get to our sponsors because it immediately lead into that. You know, for Building Better Men, a lot of our sponsors are from the older generation, or some. Like we have Say Play, which is under the leadership of Mitch Albom. We have Detroit to Nepal, which is under the leadership of Dr. Richard Keaton. We have DeRoy Testamentary Foundation. We have a lot of different folk who have looked and said, you know, I can't get out there and fight the kids or run with them or go in the neighborhoods you go into, but I can add some resources so that you can be able to bridge that gap in terms of, you know, being able to help these young people grow, being able to get them to do what they need to do. And last one, we have the Marjorie and Maxwell Foundation, which actually helps us also. So I have to talk about them because without them, it'll be very difficult for us to do what we do.
Bottom line, most kids just want to be loved and want some guidance.
Right.
All right. Otis Bellinger, thanks so much for
Thank
coming
you.
in. It's a pleasure talking with you. Keep up the good work and everything, and keep us in touch with all the things that you're doing as well.
Thank you. Appreciate you.
All right. And I'm Chuck Stokes. We'll be back next week with more newsmakers in the spotlight. We hope you have a great week.